Hey guys, welcome back. Our today's topic is 3 true cabin horror stories. So make sure to lock your doors, otherwise I'm not responsible.
I'd rented a place up in the mountains about 3 hours north of where I live. I just needed a break from my daily routine, from my job, from everything. The listing looked perfect. A small, beautiful cabin with no distractions. Just what I wanted. I was driving a rental, a sedan that had no business being on back roads in winter. The GPS said I was a mile from the cabin when the tires lost traction. I tried to control the car, but the back end swung out, and I slid right into a snowbank. I tried reversing, rocking the car, putting floor mats under the tires. Nothing worked. I was stuck. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, staring at the snow piling up on the windshield, wondering if I'd have to walk the rest of the way with my luggage. Then I saw headlights behind me. A rusted red pickup truck slowed down and pulled up alongside me. The window rolled down. The driver was an older guy, maybe in his 60s. He was wearing a black jacket and a winter cap. He looked like any other local. "Need a hand?" he asked. He was looking friendly. "I think I'm high-centered," I said, rolling my window down. "My car won't budge," he chuckled. "Yeah, these city cars aren't built for this powder. I've got a chain. Sit tight." He hopped out. I watched him in the rearview mirror as he hooked a heavy chain to my undercarriage and then to his truck hitch. He waved at me to put it in neutral. Within 2 minutes, he'd pulled me back onto the packed snow of the road. I got out to thank him. "I really appreciate that," I said. "I would have been walking." "No trouble," he said, unhooking the chain. "You staying at the old Miller place? That cabin up the hill?" "Yeah, that's the one. Nice spot. Quiet." He wiped his hands on a rag from his pocket. "You up here all by yourself?" I answered casually. "Yeah, just me. Just need some peace for a few days." He nodded, looking at the car and then back at me. "How long are you staying?" "Just until Sunday," I said. "Well, keep it in low gear getting up that driveway," he advised. "Name's Bill, by the way. I live a few miles back." "Thanks, Bill." I got back in the car and drove the last mile to the cabin. I unpacked, got the wood stove going, and felt the stress leaving my shoulders. I cooked some pasta, read a book, and watched the snow fall outside the big picture window. It was perfect. Around 10 p.m., I was washing my plate in the kitchen when I heard an engine. The cabin was far from the main road. No one came down here unless they were lost or coming to the house. I turned off the kitchen light so I could see out. 2 headlights swept across the trees and settled on my car. I went to the living room window and peeked through the slats of the blinds. It was the red pickup truck. Bill's truck. I checked my watch. It was late for a social call. I expected him to come to the door and knock, maybe check to make sure I got in okay. I stood by the door, ready to open it and say thanks again. But he didn't come to the door. Through the blinds, I saw the driver's side door open. The dome light didn't come on. He must have disabled it. He stepped out, closing the door quietly. He walked to the bed of the truck and reached over the side. He pulled out a large, dark duffel bag and set it on the snow. Then he reached back in and grabbed something long and metal. It was a crowbar. I took a step back from the window. He wasn't here to check on me. He picked up the bag and the crowbar and started walking toward the cabin, moving slowly, deliberately placing his boots in the snow to minimize the crunching sound. He walked right past the front steps and went toward the side door, the one that led into the mudroom. I didn't yell immediately, I just forgot to breathe. I moved silently across the wooden floor to the kitchen. I grabbed the biggest knife. Then I heard the handle of the side door jiggle. It was locked. Then, a soft scraping sound. He was trying to wedge the crowbar into the frame. That noise killed my hesitation instantly. The reality of it forced me to move. I couldn't just stand there anymore. I ran to the side door and slammed my hand against the wood. "I know you're there," I screamed. "Get away from the door." The scraping stopped. "I have a gun." I lied. I yelled it as loud as I could. "I have a hunting rifle, and I will shoot through this door if you don't leave right now. You won't see tomorrow." I waited. I gripped the knife handle with both hands, pointing it at the door. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps crunching away. I ran back to the living room window. I saw him walking back to the truck. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He just threw the bag and the crowbar into the bed, got in, and started the engine. He backed out of the driveway and drove off. I didn't sleep that night. I pushed the heavy oak dining table against the front door and wedged a chair under the handle of the side door. I sat in the corner of the living room with the knife, watching the driveway until the sun came up. The next morning, the adrenaline had faded, leaving me exhausted and confused. My mind was telling me to pack up and leave right then. But the roads were worse than yesterday, and in the daylight the fear seemed excessive. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was looking for firewood. No, he had a crowbar. He tried the door. I decided to go for a hike to clear my head and then drive into town to tell the police. I grabbed my coat and headed out to the trail that ran behind the property. The cold air felt good. I hiked for about an hour, trying to regulate my breathing. As I rounded a bend in the trail, I froze. Bill was there. He was standing near a trail marker, adjusting a snowshoe. He looked up and saw me. "Morning," he called out. He smiled. It was the same friendly smile from the day before. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look like a guy who had tried to break into my house 10 hours ago. I stopped about 20 feet away. I didn't smile back. "Stay right there," I said. He looked confused. "Everything okay?" "You know it's not," I said. "What were you doing at my cabin last night?" He frowned, tilting his head. "Last night, I was at home watching the game. Why?" "Don't give me that," I snapped. "Your truck, red pickup. You pulled into my driveway, took out a crowbar, and tried to pry open my side door." His eyes widened, and then a look of realization washed over his face. He slapped his leg. "Oh hell, that wasn't me." I stared at him. "It was your truck." "I know," he said, shaking his head. "My buddy, Earl, look. This is embarrassing. Earl borrowed my truck last night to pick up some lumber from his cousin's place down the road. He's got a drinking problem. He probably got turned around, thought your place was his cousin's, and when his key didn't work well, Earl is an idiot." He took a step toward me, hands up. "I swear to you, I didn't leave my house after I towed you out. I'm sorry if he scared you. I'll have a word with him." I looked at him. He seemed so genuine. And the story, well, it was flimsy, but was it possible? A drunk friend getting the wrong house? "He had a crowbar," I said. "He keeps his tools in the back," Bill said. "Probably thought the door was stuck. Look, if you want, I can give you the sheriff's number. But Earl's harmless, just dumb when he's been hitting the bottle." I didn't know what to believe. But standing there in the bright sunlight, accusing this friendly old man felt wrong. "Just tell him to stay away," I said. "Absolutely." Bill said, "Again, I'm really sorry. If you need anything, just holler. I promise, no more late-night visits." I finished my hike and went back to the cabin. I didn't go to the police. I told myself I was overreacting. I moved the table away from the door, feeling a little foolish. That night, nothing happened. I still checked the locks 3 times, but I managed to get a few hours of sleep. The third day, the weather turned. The forecast called for a blizzard, and by noon, it was a whiteout. The wind was shaking the cabin's walls. I stoked the fire and settled in, knowing I wasn't going anywhere. The snow was falling so fast that my car was already a white lump in the driveway. Around 8 p.m., the wind was screaming so loud, I almost didn't hear the voice. It was faint, barely audible over the gale. Someone was yelling. I went to the front door and listened. "Help! Someone! Help!" I turned on the porch light and cracked the door open. The wind ripped it out of my hand and slammed it against the wall. Snow blew into the living room instantly. Standing at the bottom of the porch steps was Bill. He looked bad. He was covered in snow, his face was bright red, and he was shivering violently. He wasn't wearing a heavy coat, just that flannel jacket. "Please," he yelled. My truck slid off. "I'm freezing." I hesitated. The image of the crowbar flashed in my mind. But look at him. He was shaking. It was 5 degrees below zero out there. If I closed the door, he would die. "Come in," I yelled. He stumbled up the stairs and collapsed into the mudroom. I fought the wind to pull the door shut and locked it. Bill sat on the floor, his teeth chattering so hard he couldn't talk. I ran to the linen closet and grabbed 2 thick blankets. I wrapped them around him. "Thanks," he stuttered. "Thank you." "Sit by the fire," I said. I helped him up and guided him to the couch. "I'll make tea." I went to the kitchen and boiled water. I watched him from the counter. He just sat there, staring at the fire, rubbing his hands together. He looked small and frail. I felt guilty for suspecting him. He was just a local guy having a run of bad luck. Truck went into the ditch a mile back, he managed to say when I handed him the mug. "My phone is dead." "It's okay," I said. "You can sleep on the couch. The storm is supposed to break by morning. We can call a tow truck then." "You're very kind," he said. I stayed up for another hour making small talk, but he was exhausted. He lay down on the couch and pulled the blankets up. I went into my bedroom, which was off the main hallway. I shut the door, but I didn't lock it. I figured if he needed the bathroom or water, I didn't want to make him feel like a prisoner. I fell asleep listening to the wind. I woke up at 3 a.m. It wasn't the wind that woke me. It was a sound inside the house, maybe a low creak. I opened my eyes quickly. The room was dark. I lay perfectly still, trying to listen to something. I heard another creak. It was the front door. The hinges needed oil. I knew that sound. Why was Bill opening the front door? Was he leaving? In this storm? Then I heard the whispering. "Quiet. Don't wake him." It wasn't Bill's voice. It was deeper, raspier. Then Bill's voice. "He's in the back room." He didn't lock it. I went completely rigid. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold floor. I moved as fast and as quietly as I could to the bedroom door. I pressed my ear against the wood. "Did you bring the zip ties?" Bill whispered. "Yeah, and the tape. Let's get it done." There were 2 of them. Bill had opened the door to let someone in. The friend. The guy who supposedly borrowed the truck. Or maybe just an accomplice. I grabbed the lock on my bedroom doorknob and twisted it. It was loud, especially in the silence of the house. The whispering stopped instantly. Then, heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway. They weren't sneaking anymore. I backed away from the door, looking for a weapon. The lamp on the nightstand, that was all I had. I grabbed it, ripping the cord from the wall. The doorknob jiggled violently. Then a heavy thud as a shoulder hit the wood. "Open the door," Bill yelled. The nice, friendly persona was gone. "We have a leak. The pipes burst. You need to come out. I'm calling the police," I shouted back. I was scared, but I tried to sound angry. "I have a reception. They are on their way." He laughed, a cold, hard sound from the other side of the door. "Call 'em," the other voice shouted. "Look outside, buddy. Nobody is driving in this weather. By the time they get here, we'll be long gone." I dialed 911 on my cell phone. The signal was weak. "911, what is your emergency?" "Someone is in my house." I screamed into the phone. "2 men, I'm locked in the bedroom. I'm at the Miller cabin on Ridge Road." "Okay, sir, calm down," the dispatcher said. "We have a unit hold on, sir. The roads are impassable in that sector. We are dispatching a snowcat, but it's going to take time." "How much time?" "At least 45 minutes. "Can you get out of the house?" "No, they're in the hallway." The door frame splintered slightly. They were kicking it. "Open up, kid," Bill said. "Make it easy. We just want to talk." "I have a gun," I yelled again. "I swear I'll kill the first one through this door." I didn't have a gun. I had a ceramic lamp base. They stopped kicking. I heard them muttering. "He's lying," the raspier voice said. "He didn't have one the other night." "You want to risk it?" Bill asked. "If he hits you, we're stuck here. Too much noise. Just break the damn lock." They started again. Not kicking this time, but prying. I heard metal digging into the wood, a screwdriver, a knife. I dragged the dresser across the floor. It was heavy, full of clothes. I shoved it against the door just as the wood around the knob began to crack. Police are 10 minutes away. I lied. They're almost here. They worked at the door for another 20 minutes. The 20 minutes dragged on. I stood there, holding the lamp, staring at the gap widening in the door frame. I could see movement through the crack. I saw a slice of a flannel sleeve. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. Lights, the raspy voice hissed. Blue lights down the valley. They must have seen the reflection off the snow from miles away. "Let's go," Bill said. "We can still—" "No, leave it. Go." I heard running footsteps. The front door slammed. I didn't move. I stayed behind the dresser, clutching the lamp, listening. The wind howled. The house creaked, but there were no footsteps. I stayed on the line with the dispatcher the whole time. "They stopped," I told her. "I think they left." "Stay in the room," she said. "Do not come out until the officers identify themselves." It took another hour before I heard the heavy tread of boots on the porch and a megaphone. "State police, come out with your hands visible." I moved the dresser. My arms were heavy. I opened the damaged door and walked into the hallway. The front door was wide open. Snow had drifted halfway into the living room. The couch where Bill had slept was empty. The blankets were folded neatly. The police searched the house and the surrounding woods. They found tire tracks from a truck that had been parked down the road, hidden in a logging trail. They had walked through the storm to get to me. They didn't steal anything. My laptop was on the coffee table. My wallet was on the kitchen counter. My car keys were by the door. The officer looked at the door frame of my bedroom. He ran his finger over the gouge marks. "They weren't here for your stuff," he said, looking at me with a grim expression. "If they wanted to rob you, they would have taken the laptop and left." They spent 20 minutes trying to get into that room. They never found Bill or his friend. The rental information for the cabin had been hacked a week prior. The owner didn't know anything about it. I left that morning. I drove back to the city and haven't left my apartment in 3 days. It started because I needed to finish my manuscript. I've been working on this book for 2 years, and I was hitting a wall. Distractions at home were too much. Netflix, roommates, just the noise of the city. I browsed Airbnb and found this place up in the Cascades. It looked perfect. It was a classic A-frame cabin. You know the type, basically a giant wooden triangle where the entire front wall is floor-to-ceiling glass. It was isolated, miles from the nearest town, tucked away back on a private logging road. I booked it for a week. The first 2 days were actually great. I cranked out about 10,000 words. It was quiet. Just a few pines were shaking because of the wind. But on the third afternoon, the weather turned. The forecast called for a wintry mix, but what we got was a full-blown blizzard. By sunset, the snow was already piling up against the deck. I made a fire in the wood stove, cooked some pasta, and just watched the snow fall through that massive glass wall. It felt cozy at the time. I didn't realize then that how much the glass wall looked like a fishbowl. When it's dark outside and you have the lights on inside, you can't see anything out there, but everyone who is outside can see you. I went to bed around midnight. The loft bedroom overlooked the main living area, so I still had a view of the woods through the upper part of the glass. The snow was coming down hard, white streaks blurring the trees. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. The storm had passed. I climbed down the ladder, made a strong pot of coffee, and walked out onto the front deck to take in the view. It was breathtaking. The world was completely white. The trees were bowed under the weight of the snow, and the clearing in front of the cabin was a perfect smooth blanket. No tire tracks, no animal prints, nothing, just pristine white. I took a sip of my coffee and leaned against the railing. That's when I looked down at the deck itself. I was shocked because there was a single set of boot prints, large, heavy treads. They came out of the tree line on the left side of the property, cut straight across the pristine snow, and came right up the stairs to the deck. I followed them with my eyes. They walked right up to the glass sliding door. Then there was a mess of prints right there on the mat, like someone had been shifting their weight, standing there for a while. Then the tracks turned around and looped back into the trees on the right side. I pulled my phone out. I checked the weather app. The snow had officially stopped falling at 4 a.m. It was 8:30 a.m. now. These tracks were sharp enough to get attention. If these had been made during the storm, the snow would have filled them in or softened the edges. That meant whoever this was had walked up to my cabin after 4 a.m. I looked at the glass door. I looked at the spot where the prints stopped. From that angle, they would have had a direct line of sight to the loft, to my bed. Someone had stood there in the storm, and they had something on their mind. I went inside and locked the slider. I checked the deadbolt on the front door. I checked the windows in the bathroom. Everything was locked. I tried to tell myself it was just a hunter, or maybe a park ranger checking on properties after the storm. But why come up to the glass? Why not knock? I spent the rest of the day thinking about the incident. I couldn't write. Every time a branch snapped under the weight of the snow, my head snapped toward the window. I closed all the curtains on the lower level, but the upper triangle of glass didn't have curtains. That night, I slept on the couch downstairs with a kitchen knife on the floor next to me. I didn't want to be up in the bedroom because of the glassy walls. The next morning, day 4, I decided I was going to pack up. The road hadn't been plowed yet, but I have an SUV with 4-wheel drive. I figured I could risk it. I just wanted to get out of there. I opened the front door to start loading my bags. There was a piece of paper stuck to the outside of the door frame. It wasn't taped, it was jammed onto a splinter of wood. It was a piece of torn notebook paper. I pulled it off. The handwriting was jagged, done in pencil, barely legible. You should stay with someone. It's not safe to stay alone on snowy nights. I dropped the paper. It fluttered into the snow. I looked around the clearing. Nothing moving, just the trees and the blinding white snow. I tried to start my car. It cranked, sputtered, and died. I tried again. Nothing. The battery was dead, which made no sense because it was a new battery. I popped the hood. The terminals were loose. Not just loose, unscrewed. I fixed them as fast as I could, my fingers numb and clumsy, but when I tried the car again, it still wouldn't turn over. It was flooded or something. I'm not a mechanic. All I knew was that I was stuck. There was no cell service at the cabin. The listing had mentioned that, touting it as a digital detox. I had to drive 3 miles down the road to get a bar of signal. I was trapped. I went back inside and locked everything again. I pushed the heavy oak dining table against the front door. I checked the knife. I grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. I wasn't going to sleep tonight. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee at 10 p.m. I sat in the living room, facing the glass wall. I had turned off all the lights inside. I knew that if the lights were on, I was blind. If it were dark inside, I might have a chance to see movement outside against the snow. 12 a.m. passed, then 1 a.m. The night was silent. You know that sound when it's so quiet your ears start to hear something? That's all I heard. Then at 2:27 a.m., there was a crunching sound outside. It was the distinct sound of dry snow compressing under a heavy boot. It was close, right off the deck. I gripped the fire poker tightly and I held my breath, listening. Footsteps were slow and careful. They were walking up the wooden stairs of the deck. I was sitting in the corner of the room where no one could see me. I watched the silhouette of the deck railing, but nothing else. Then a shape rose up from the stairs. It moved to the window. I was so scared that I couldn't breathe properly. A head popped up right in front of the glass. It was maybe 3 feet away from where I was sitting, separated only by a double pane of glass. He was wearing a clown mask, but it looked old, yellowed, with patches of hair missing. The smile was too wide, painted in a dark red that looked black. He just stood there. He didn't look around. He looked straight at the corner where I was hiding, like he knew exactly where I was. He raised a hand. He wore dirty, oversized wool gloves. He waved. Then he came closer and tapped on the glass. I didn't move. He leaned his forehead against the glass. I could see the condensation from his breath, fogging up the pane around the mask's mouth. He raised a finger and started writing something in the fog on the glass. I watched the letters form, backwards from my perspective, but clear enough. He wrote, "Let me in. I'm cold." He stood there for another minute, just staring. The mask had empty black holes for eyes. I couldn't see the human eyes underneath. I prayed he would try to break the glass so I could attack him. I needed the tension to break. I needed to do something. But he didn't break it. He just lowered his hand, stepped back from the window, and walked away. I heard his boots crunching on the snow, fading back toward the woods. I didn't move for an hour. I waited until the sun started to come up before I finally exhaled. When the sun was high, I decided to hike and check if anyone was there or if anyone could help me. I just wanted to make sure that he was gone. I grabbed the knife. I put on my heaviest coat and boots. I opened the slider. The writing was still there, faint smudges on the glass. I looked at the tracks. They led back into the woods, the same as the first day. But this time, I decided to follow them. I walked for about 10 minutes, deep into the tree line. The snow was deep, up to my shins. The woods were dense here, lots of pine and scrub brush. The trail continued for another 100 yards until it hit a fork. It wasn't an official trail, just a natural clearing in the trees that split in 2 directions. I stopped. There were fresh tracks on both paths. The tracks I had been following went to the left, but there was another set of tracks, different boots, slightly smaller, coming from the right and joining the path further up. There was more than one of them. I gripped the knife tighter. My common sense was screaming at me to turn around, but I needed to see where they were going. I needed to know if there was a road, a camp, a car, anything I could report to the police. I took the left path. I walked slowly, stepping as quietly as I could in the crunchy snow. The trees began to thin out slightly. About 5 minutes later, I rounded a large boulder and froze. About 50 yards ahead, in the middle of the narrow trail, stood 3 men. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. They were just standing there, facing me. They were all wearing heavy winter gear, jackets, thick camo pants, and they were all wearing ski masks. They were just doing nothing. It was like they knew I was coming, like they had left the tracks specifically to lead me here. The one in the middle took a step forward. I didn't wait to see what he wanted. I just turned and ran faster than ever. I didn't care about the noise. I didn't care about tripping. I crashed through the brush, ignoring the trail, cutting a straight line back toward the A-frame. I could hear shouting behind me, then the sound of heavy boots pounding the snow. They were running behind me. My chest was burning, but I couldn't stop. I slipped once, slamming my knee into a hidden stump, but the adrenaline masked the pain. I scrambled up and kept running. I saw the peak of the cabin through the trees. I burst into the clearing. I didn't go inside. I went straight to my car. I threw myself into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I jammed the key in. I prayed that my fix on the battery terminals held. The engine cranked. Come on. It caught. The engine finally started. I threw it in reverse. I didn't even look. I stomped on the gas. The SUV fishtailed wildly in the deep snow, slinging slush everywhere. As I swung the front end around to face the driveway, I saw them. They were coming out of the tree line. 3 dark figures were sprinting across the pristine white lawn. The one in the lead was holding something. It looked like a hatchet. I slammed the car into drive and floored it. The tires spun for a terrifying second, digging for traction, and then they bit. The car shot forward. I hit the unplowed logging road, doing 40. The car was sliding all over the place, bouncing off snowbanks, scraping against trees. I didn't lift my foot off the gas until I hit the paved county road 3 miles later. I drove straight to the nearest police station in the next town over. I told them everything. I gave them the description of the masks, the tracks, and the note. They sent a deputy up there to check it out. They called me a few hours later. They found the footprints and a makeshift campsite about a mile into the woods where I had seen the men. But the men were gone. The police said it looked like they had been living out there for weeks. They found sleeping bags, a propane heater, and a pile of opened mail. That was the worst part. The deputy told me the mail didn't belong to the cabin owner. It belonged to the previous guest who had stayed there the week before me. They hadn't just been watching me. They'd been hunting that spot for a while. I'm back in the city now, and I'll never ever go to that cabin again. I've always been a winter person. I know most people complain about the cold and the gray skies, but I love it. I love the way the world gets quiet when it snows. It's like something far better than regular life. That's why I booked the cabin. I needed a break from the city, from work, and from people in general. I found a place online about 3 hours north. It was listed as a secluded getaway, which usually just means it has bad Wi-Fi, but the photos look great, sitting right on the edge of a thick forest. I packed the car on a Friday morning. It was just me and Buster, my 3-year-old German Shepherd mix. He knew something was up the second I grabbed his leash. He jumped into the back seat before I even finished loading the cooler. The drive up was easy. The further north we went, the deeper the snow got. By the time I turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, the trees were coated in thick white blankets. It was perfect. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures. It was a single-story A-frame with a big front porch and a yard that stretched out for maybe 50 yards before hitting the woods. We got there around 2 p.m. I unpacked the groceries and let Buster run around. He was loving it, burying his nose in the snow and sneezing, then running in circles. Since I had a few hours of daylight left and nothing to do, I decided to act like a kid again. "All right, Buster," I said, zipping up my coat. "Let's build something." I started rolling a snowball in the front yard. The snow was that perfect packing kind, heavy and wet. It didn't take long to get a good base going. I rolled it until it was heavy enough that I was sweating inside my jacket. I placed it right in the middle of the yard. I made the middle section, then the head. I found some decent-sized stones near the driveway for eyes and buttons. I didn't have a carrot, so I just used a smaller rock for a nose. For the arms, I walked over to the tree line and grabbed 2 fallen branches. I stuck the branches into the sides of the snowman. I positioned the snowman so it was facing the woods. My thinking was that it looked like a sentry, guarding the cabin from the trees. Its back was to the porch. I stepped back to admire it. It was about 5 feet tall, standing roughly 30 feet away from the front steps. "Good job, buddy," I told Buster. He just peed on a bush nearby. We went inside as the sun started to dip. The temperature dropped fast. I cranked up the thermostat, threw a frozen pizza in the oven, and settled onto the couch to watch a movie on my laptop. It was a solid start to the trip. By 8 p.m., it was really dark outside. The cabin had these big picture windows looking out onto the porch and the yard, but at night they just turned into black mirrors. I couldn't see anything out there, just my own reflection sitting on the couch. I finished the pizza and was about to open a soda when Buster stood up. He had been sleeping on the rug by the door. His ears perked up, swiveling forward. "What is it?" I asked. He didn't look at me. He was staring at the front door. He let out a terrifying snarl. I muted the TV. "Buster, quiet." He didn't stop. He took a stiff step toward the door, the hair on his back standing up in a ridge. I stood up and walked over to the window next to the door. I put my hand up to the glass to block the reflection and peered out. I couldn't see much, so I flipped the switch for the porch light. The yellow floodlight buzzed on, lighting up the porch and the front yard. The yard was empty, just smooth white snow, and the snowman. I let out a breath. See? Nothing out there, tough guy. I was about to turn the light off when I stopped. My hand hovered over the switch. The snowman was facing the house. I stood there for a second, just blinking. I looked at the rocks making up the eyes. They were staring right at the window. The stick arms were pointing toward the porch, not the woods. I frowned. That's weird, I muttered. I tried to replay the afternoon in my head. Did I build it facing the house? No. I specifically remembered sticking the arms in so it looked like it was watching the trees. I wanted it to look like a guard. I rubbed the back of my neck. Maybe the wind? I listened. It was dead silent outside, no wind howling in the eaves. And even if there was wind, a snowman that heavy doesn't just spin around on its base. The bottom snowball probably weighed 80 pounds. Maybe I'm losing it, I said to Buster. He wasn't growling anymore, but he was still standing by the door, rigid. I turned the porch light off. I didn't like looking at it. It gave me a weird feeling in my stomach. I went back to the couch and tried to focus on the movie. 20 minutes passed. I couldn't pay attention to the screen. My eyes kept drifting to the black window. I kept thinking about the physics of it. Could the snow have melted at the base, causing the top to swivel? It seemed impossible. Buster started up again. This time, it was louder. He walked right up to the door and let out a sharp, warning bark. "Buster, stop," I hissed. I didn't want him barking at nothing. He ignored me. He started scratching at the bottom of the door, whining and growling at the same time. I paused the movie and walked back to the window. I didn't want to look out, but I had to. I cupped my hands against the glass. I didn't turn the light on this time. My eyes adjusted to the dark after a few seconds. The moonlight reflecting off the snow gave everything a bluish-gray tint. I saw the snowman. I stepped back from the window. My heart was beating faster than ever. It was closer. I shook my head, squeezing my eyes shut and opening them again. "No way," I whispered. I looked again. When I built it, I had walked about 10 paces from the porch steps. It was right in the middle of the yard. Now the snowman was definitely closer. It looked like it was maybe 20 feet away. And it was tilted slightly, like it had been shoved. I grabbed my phone from my pocket. I opened the camera app and zoomed in. The screen was grainy, but I could see the base of the snowman. There were tracks. Not footprints leading to the snowman, but a wide dragged mark in the snow behind it. The truth was terrifying. Someone was behind it. I was terrified, but I stood there, staring at this lump of snow, waiting for movement. The snowman jerked. It was a small movement, just a few inches forward. Then it stopped. Then it moved again. Someone was crouching behind the bottom snowball, using it as a shield. They were pushing it across the yard, inch by inch, closing the distance to the house. They were using the snowman to cover their approach, so I wouldn't see them until they were right at the porch. I looked at the black windows of the cabin. I was displayed in a lit aquarium. Whoever was out there could see me perfectly, but I couldn't see them. I dropped to the floor. "Buster, come," I whispered. I crawled to the kitchen counter, where I left the car keys and picked them up. I needed to check the back door. I hadn't checked it since we arrived. I kept low, moving down the hallway to the back of the cabin. I reached up and twisted the deadbolt on the rear door. I went back to the living room, staying below the window line. I could hear Buster pacing near the front door. Then I heard a sound from the front porch. It was the sound of packed snow grinding against wood. I froze. I looked up at the bottom of the front door. The sound came again. They had pushed the snowman all the way to the porch steps. They were pushing it up the stairs. I grabbed a heavy flashlight from the side table. I didn't turn it on. I just gripped it like a club. I knew I couldn't stay here. If they got onto the porch, they were right at the door. The lock was flimsy. One kick and they'd be in. I needed to get to the car. The car was parked on the side of the house, closer to the back door than the front. "Buster," I signaled. He came to me, but he was still in attacking mode. We moved to the back door. I took a deep breath. I had to time this. I heard a heavy thump against the front door. The snowman had hit the wood. Then, silence. I unlocked the back door. I grabbed Buster's collar. "Go," I said. I threw the door open and we sprinted. The cold air hit my face like a slap. The snow was deep, slowing me down. I stumbled toward the driveway. I didn't look back. I clicked the key fob, hitting the unlock button. The headlights of my SUV flashed, lighting up the side of the house. I threw the back door open for Buster, and he leaped in. I scrambled into the driver's seat and slammed the door. I locked it immediately. My hands were slipping on the keys as I jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I didn't wait for it to warm up. I threw it into reverse. As the car swung backward, the headlights swept across the front of the cabin. I slammed on the brakes. The snowman was right there. It was pressed up against the front door. It was mashed against the wood, the stick arms bent and broken from being shoved so hard. And standing right behind it was a man. He was tall, wearing a white camouflage hunting jacket and white pants. He blended in almost perfectly with the snow. The only reason I saw him was that the red taillights of my car caught the contrast of his dark boots. He wasn't looking at the car. He was looking through the glass of the front door, his hands cupped around his eyes, trying to see inside. He held a long, metal object in his right hand, a crowbar. I didn't honk. I didn't yell. I shifted the car into drive and floored it. The tires spun on the ice for a terrifying second before gripping the gravel. I fishtailed down the driveway, tearing through the untouched snow I had admired just a few hours ago. I drove for 20 minutes before I slowed down. I didn't have a signal on my phone until I hit the main highway. I pulled over at a gas station that was lit up like a Christmas tree and called the police. They sent a deputy out to the cabin an hour later. I waited at the station. When the deputy came back, he told me the cabin was empty. The front door had been pried open. The place was tossed. Whoever it was, they were looking for something or someone. He asked if I saw anything else. "The snowman," I said.